I've been convinced since the late 60s when I read de Molina and Rowland's article on the erosion of the ozone layer, when they concluded what the hell else has escaped us, that we are undermining our own existence. And the environmental problem, of course, has worsened since then, and we are trying to solve an environmental problem with a problematic brain. Never since Narcissus looked at the reflection of his face on the river and fell in love with it has there been such an adoration of a bodily organ as there is now of the brain, and never with as little justification. And I'll mention to you the triple delusion by the time I complete my presentation, but I'll say to you just a little experience I've had with my granddaughter of 8 years of age. I asked her to tell me, what will you do today that does not pollute? And she said, running. And I said, good, but if you run, you wear out your shoes and the companies will have to make more shoes and that pollutes. Running barefoot. That's very good, but if you run, you increase your appetite and there have to be more trucks bringing in food for you to eat in the city. More chickens will be decapitated to feed you. She said, then sitting in a chair. I said, that's very nice, but to make a chair, you have to cut a tree. Then lying on the ground naked. It's hard to think of something you would do that doesn't pollute. While at it, the attitude of humans of who we are, that is, which philosophy has a lot to say, and of course Darwin had a lot to say, is interesting, that it is really a hubris. And I was trying to explain to her what hubris was, and I mentioned to her the story of Sisyphus. I said, this king of Corinth in ancient Greece was condemned by the gods to push a rock straight up the mountain during the day, only for it to fall down again, and have to push it up again the next day, because he was narcissistic, egotistical, and insulting. She said, like Trump. And there is hubris in humans, and there is Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. So I'll take you through a journey through the brain to what some philosophers and neuroscientists said about the brain. Then I will show you some photos of the places the book is set. And now, here, I wanted to do an atlas of the human brain, having done an atlas of the rat brain. But before doing so, I thought of trying to make an atlas of the brain of another primate, non-human one, where I could get the brain in a short period of postmortems. For the human, you have to wait 8 hours, by which time things degrade, and you don't get as good staining, you don't have the power then. So I wrote to the Toronto Park Zoo for the opportunity to do a postmortem on a chimpanzee once a chimpanzee died. This works, by the way?
Yes.
Good. And they replied, that was back in 1980, that they would be happy to oblige, but they had not had the death of a chimpanzee in the zoo for a decade. 2 months after receiving my letter, 3 chimpanzees died. Luckily, they didn't suspect me, and I studied the brain of one of them, and the brain stem led us to do an atlas of the human brain stem, because we knew what to expect. Once you know what to expect, you can find it. And there's the atlas of the human brain stem, which was based on the work we did on the chimpanzee. And the external similarity you saw previously on the orangutan, I didn't have a chimpanzee to pose for me, is actually reflected internally as well in the brain parts. They're also similar. Indeed, the same, homologous as we call them. There are no different parts in the brain of a chimpanzee in the brain stem that we studied in parallel with the human brain. No different. They are the same. guess what? This marmoset, a small primate, the size of a small rat, the parts of the brain are also the same with us. It's not the case for the rat. There are heterologous parts in the cortex, for example, for the rat and human. But in the marmoset, there seems to be no difference between the parts of the brain of the marmoset. Of course, you don't have gorillas in university studying or chimpanzees. We think that the reason is that the brain is half the size of the human, and you don't have the synaptic buffer to accommodate the higher learning. You can get some language skills in the chimpanzee after maybe 3,000 words, which is equivalent to something like 2-3-year-old child, and they can know the difference between the boy hit the ball and the ball hit the boy, which have identical words in it. And the cartoon can display one or the other, and they know which one is which. So they have cognitive capacity and some linguistic capacity, but certainly humans have far more of it, and presumably it's the size of the brain that makes the difference. But internally, the parts are the same. Of course, the larger you are, anybody larger than me would likely have larger palm, larger stomach, and larger brain. Doesn't mean they're smarter, because you have to account for the housekeeping functions of the brain, who are also have to be greater. And once you subtract those, you leave with the parts that are capable of higher cognitive thinking, and then that wouldn't be that different. And in the marmoset, look, we did the map that took me 5 years. And the areas that you see here are the ones also you see in the human brain. Now, here's the human brain. This is an atlas we're constructing now. We haven't published it yet, and the person is not dead. It's one of us. 3 of us are doing this work. And here you'll see his brain in from one side to the other as it moves. Hopefully the video will play. And that's it. We'll have to press once more.
Play the bottom left.
This one here.
Just click it.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, good. And yeah, this is Mark Shearer. He was my postdoc. He's now a lecturer at Wollongong University. And you can see his brain. And that's what you're studying now. The living brain. You might say, why not post-mortem? You can get it from the morgue, and you can cut it in fine and big slices. Well, no, because here you can see the colors which indicate the direction of fibers in the brain, which you don't see in the post-mortem tissue. All right. So we have some benefits out of studying the living human brain, and also we have the native space. You don't distort the brain by taking it out. Now, the brain, astoundingly modern view, was expressed by Hippocrates. Men ought to know that from the brain only arise our pleasures, joys, laughter, jest, as well as our sorrows, pain, griefs, and tears. And unfortunately, Aristotle, possibly the greatest scientist of antiquity, misjudged and considered the brain to be there to cool the blood, air conditioning. And unfortunately, well, you know what they say about professors, their greatness is measured by how long they manage to stymie progress in their field. And the adherents of Aristotle kept his views alive for way too long, to the point that Vesalius burned the books of the ancients. They wouldn't do observations, they would just follow Aristotle. But there was, of course, Aristotle is known for other things too. He set the stage for logic, the logic of nature, the theater of nature, that allowed Theophrastos his pupil to search for the relation between light, climate, and other plants and animals in the behavior of humans and of animals. So Theophrastos is the father of ecology. There's Theophrastos. And Aristotle was challenged, or rather by a follower of Hippocrates, by the name of Galen of Pergamon. And you see the relation between Kos and Pergamon in today's Turkey, where Kos was the island where Hippocrates was on, and Pergamon where Galen was. And the encephalocentric view of Galen and cardiocentric view of Aristotle battled each other out for 1,300 years until the dawn of modern science. And you see here Shakespeare in The Merchant of Venice says, "Tell me," Portia asks, "where is fancy bred? Or in the heart, fancy being love, or in the head?" And if you go today in Bondi Junction on February 15th, you would see who won out. Was it Galen or was it Aristotle and the ancient Egyptians? You know, the ancient Egyptians heedlessly discarded the brain in funerary practices and sent millennia of pharaohs brainless to their afterlife. And if you go to Bondi Junctions, the pharaohs are alive. I went there to pick up a card for my girlfriend, and I was confronted with 300 cards, each of them with at least one red heart on them, none of them with a brain. And it forced me to write a letter in the newspaper. "Darling, I love you from the bottom of my brain." And a journalist from ABC Melbourne called me, "Are you insisting that the heart has nothing to do with love?" I said, "If in a heart transplant I get your heart, I am not going to fall in love with your husband." She said, "What a pity, and he's such a lovely man." The brain, equally beautiful, but true, also true. After such a battle to localize the seat of the soul, psychology loses its soul. In the 1930s, we have a psychologist in here, and she can vouch for us, I think, that no psychologist uses the word soul. Nobody, not just a few nuts in some departments, just nobody used the word soul. And it would be cruel if you were to use it and say to a child that had some behavioral difficulties, it's an autistic child, "It's your soul, your soul." You could say that maybe some imbalance in chemicals in your brain. Let's see what environmental modifications we can make to assist you in coping with circumstances. Anything but blame the soul. Remember, psychoactive drugs, psychotherapeutic drugs act on anything but the soul. And before giving a lecture like this to the clinical neuropsychologist of Australia, I went to the coffee hour break before, and I asked people, "Do you have a soul?" The answer was always, "Pardon me." They couldn't believe the question. Eventually, one girl said, "I had one until I started my PhD." There's no ghost in the machine, nor soul for scientific considerations. If the soul is where emotion, motivation reside, when mental activity occurs, sensations are perceived, memories are stored, love is manufactured, reasoning takes place, decisions are taken, then there's no need to hypothesize its existence. There is an organ that already performs these functions. So, for psychology, the soul is surplus to requirements. Skinner, behavior is the outcome of two and only two factors: genetic endowment and environment. Skinner, I had the pleasure of meeting him. Is there at least free will? I mean, what is left in those humans, poor humans? Alas, poor humans, what is left? Is there at least free will? Well, many neuroscientists, Skinner firstly, believe that behavior is the outcome of two and only two factors over which we have no choice. Our genetic endowment, we don't select our parents. The environment, we don't select whether our mother was smoking, our grandmother was a drug addict, epigenetic influences, or simply the environment, the early environment, the intrauterine environment, not the society we are born in. If you are born in Iran, you're more likely, or Afghanistan, more likely to be a Muslim. If you are born in France, more likely to be a Catholic or worse. The book deals with identical twins raised apart. As different artists will sculpt different statues from the same block of marble, different environments will produce different characters, even in identical twins. The environment sculpts character just as this unknown artist, possibly Phidias, sculpted Apollo from Parian marble in this statue from the temple of Zeus in Olympia. The environment sculpts behavior, much like Praxiteles sculpted Hermes. Poor humans. They have no free will. None at all. There's no room in the march of genes environment for free will to will in and take part in the parade. And in one behavior, I think I can convince at least some of you that definitely there is no free will. Who has heard of love? Don't listen to me, listen to Carmen. She said it. L'amour, il n'y a jamais, jamais connu de loi. Love has never known the law. And you might say, oh, well, this is just academic stuff. Well, just look what's happening in the world. 50% of the people who are abandoned by the partner interfere with that partner, or more than 50% actually, at their work, at their home, in the internet. Some of them hit her, some of them kill her, some of them commit suicide. If only they listen to neuroscientists or philosophers, they would know that much like he cannot discard the love that torments him, she cannot make herself love him. I hope I have convinced some of you of the view of Hippocrates that the brain is important. The question then is if the brain is the right size. If the brain were smaller, less clever, and capable of language than what it is, it would not have been able to produce the science and technology which threaten existence. If the brain was larger than what it is, humans might have been able to comprehend the problem, even solve it. The conclusion is that the brain is not in the Goldilocks zone. The brain is not, my conclusion is not the right size. You've heard of the Goldilocks zone, right? You've heard of the Goldilocks zone? Right, let me see, the Earth is the right distance not to be burned by the sun or not to be frozen too far away from it. Goldilocks Goldilocks zone around the sun. Well, the brain is just not in the Goldilocks zone. If it were smaller, would have been no problem. Monkeys are not threatening their existence in that of the other species. If it were larger, possibly we could have understood the problem. Size encodes, of course. It's just not the right size. And we haven't understood those basic things that at least many neuroscientists believe. But by the way, what I'm telling you is probably the majority view in neuroscience, but the minority could be correct, right? We don't sort things out by majority vote, right? But the view is that we are slaves of yesterday. And the psychologists, or we have one psychologist in here, the psychologists are extremely clever people. You wouldn't believe what they discovered. They discovered that today is tomorrow's yesterday. And they take people who have problems and they talk to them. Cognitive behavioral therapy. And this way, they can be their environment and they can assist them to overcome the obsessions, compulsions. They love without reciprocation. If we're free, would we not be able to discard those things that torment us? Unfortunately, not only humans don't understand that they are these shortcomings, that they are slaves of yesterday, that the brain cannot possibly make any decision by that which is the outcome of its genetic endowment and the influences that have molded it until yesterday. Tomorrow they might make another decision if today the information is different. But they believe, those humans believe that they are made in the image of God. Look what happened here to poor Phaethon when he took the reins of the sun and was not doing a good job. And Zeus sent a thunderbolt to throw him down to earth, smashing himself on the rocks. The gods did not have much use for hubris, and yet we are committing that hubris. We think that we are made in the image of God. If we dispel these notions and arm ourselves with the truth that we don't know why we're on this planet, as E.O. Wilson said, puzzled we stand before nature. We have a brain that has leftovers of the reptilian period. I've studied them. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions. Who would consider the obsession that the Catholic Church has with sex? Forget about the sins that they commit with the way they've structured their church, but simply trying to regulate whether you wear prophylactics or not, regardless as to whether that will assist you to prevent yourself from getting HIV or other venereal diseases, or venereal diseases, regardless of that, to assist you to plan your family. That they will prohibit that. And you might say, well, people don't listen to that. No, but foreign aid in the United States once was contingent on a family planning program on the recipient country. Now requires that there be no family program because the churches have influence, evil influence. If that is not an evil influence of the church, and more crimes committed today in the name of God than in the name of the devil. Just look around. Not many devils around. And someone is complaining about what I'm saying. And so I hope that, armed with the truth, that we are really part of primates with a larger brain, but carrying what has been endowed to us by nature. We might understand our place in this world and change our course from change the direction of our stern from the grave of our children to the dawn, and make wings of our oars.